That was disturbing. That was upsetting. The end was pretty upsetting. The point is that violence from parents, drinking from parents, is horror to small children, to any children really, but to small children especially. And that's a good point. And I like to see games tackling bigger subject matter like this. So yeah. I'm gonna guess, I don't know, when did I start playing? 11? I'm gonna guess that was like maybe 3 hours for me, 2.5 maybe. I think it was 16 with the code, the pre-order code I used, coupon. I don't remember if it was coupon or just standard pre-order discount. I think this is Kickstarter, so there's gonna be a lot of names in here. So that wasn't the father at the beginning. Well, it could have been the father. It could have been the father, but it could have been. Well, it's that's not all that happened. Getting the arm fixed isn't what happened. He's being taken away from a bad household situation. So that was either the father or child's protective services or something to that effect, or grandfather. It could have been any male really. Getting the teddy bear fixed is just symbolic of fixing. The kid's being taken away from the alcoholic mother is what's happening. So that ending was much more significant than just the teddy getting fixed. It's symbolic. This whole game is, symbolic. It's of what violence and alcohol and or drug abuse would look like from the perspective of a child, and in this case, the only escape for the child was somebody finally coming and taking the child away, which is sometimes the only way. And unfortunately, there's a lot of times where nobody knows that that's happening to a kid, and the kid doesn't have the ability, or, well, the kid never has the ability, but somebody else doesn't have the ability or the knowledge enough to take a child away from a bad situation like that. So that was kind of the point of what they were saying. At least that's what I'm getting from it. So yeah, it's Gone Home-ish in that way, where it's a walk through a room, solve puzzles. There's a mysterious, creepy, almost horror. Well, this one's more horror because he literally sees his mother as she transforms into a monster when she's drinking, which is, that's the psychological way you describe something like that. Is there are happy drunks and there are angry drunks, and oftentimes you hear of an alcoholic turning into a monster, metaphorical, and from a 2-year-old's point of view, that's becomes even more literal, and that's how they portray it here. But both that game, Gone Home, and this game, they tackle much bigger subject matter in a really interesting way, and I think it's really important, not only for the credibility of games as a whole, but also just because it's a form of medium, whether you want to argue if it's art or not. I personally think it is. Good art tackles bigger subjects. So it's really good to see them tackling something like this. Alcohol abuse, child neglect. Those are some pretty heavy topics. Film did the same thing in its early days. Film Broken Flowers is a silent film, black and white, that tackled some issues of child abuse, and this is in the 20s. I think Broken Flowers was early 20s. There were a lot of early films when film was a brand new medium that they tackled much bigger things, slavery, Birth of a Nation, depending on what side you fall on in the debate of that. Was some people think it's a pro-slavery movie, other people think it's just an accurate depiction of America in its early years, but film was a medium that tackled really big subject matter, and in a lot of ways legitimized itself as an art form. And I think it's important that games are doing the same thing, tackling bigger subject matter like that. They have the added benefit of being an interactive medium, so you can experience stories that you might otherwise not experience. So as far as subject matter, that was well done. I thought it was really well done. Let's go back to what do I always say about horror or suspense games? Sound design. And this game has some good sound design. It's got some very subtle sound design, as in the breathing and the baby sounds that you as the 2-year-old player character make. Then the ambient noise, the rooms, they always have some sort of hum or a buzz that's off kilter in some way, shape, or form. The opening with lightning strikes and creaking doors, and starting with the sound of the dryer shaking. That's very frightening. So you got to remember yourself, even as a younger child, say you're 5, 6, 7, things like the furnace in the basement or things like that in the middle of the night would frighten you. So when it opens as this 2-year-old and there's this creepy noise, and it turns out it's the dryer running, and it just so happens that his stuffed animal was stuffed inside of it, which is creepy. But so that's really good. They take a sound that the sound of a dryer, they kind of add in some sweeteners, some low sounds, and to make it sound creepier. And then you got to remember, from the perspective of a baby, well, I have headphones on, so I might have heard them a little bit more. I don't know. But from the perspective of a baby, in the middle of the night, woken and your toy is missing or whatever, that's a creepy sound. And you're already frightened because your mother's in this kind of weird state that you don't understand, turning into a monster, effectively. So some subtle sound designs, and then some creepy sound design, like when she's actually the monster, and he's hiding from her, and when the baby sees the monster, that's when the screen shakes and you get the strange sounds, and so that was well done. And the music is kind of what you hear now. It's more of an ambient background sound. But then there was occasionally bits of music here and there, and then the voicing. You never quite hear what's being said all the time, because you don't understand everything, and that's whether by design or not. A baby has a very limited vocabulary when they first start learning words. They only know a handful of words, so the fact that only some of the adults talking the words make it through, like at the end when the mom is apologizing, but they're all muted and they're confusing and you can't quite understand what's going on, and that all plays into the story, and then it's realistic when you think about a baby trying to understand words, and so that was well done. And visually, it's not a AAA title. It looked good where it needed to look good. Texture variance wasn't super high, but lighting is what made it work. And that's always what's my second key. My first key is audio design. My second is lighting for any sort of scary, quote-unquote scary, horror, suspense game, whatever you want to call it. So I think it hit all the right notes for what it needed to hit. It's not a super expensive title. It's exploring new subject matter that we don't deal with much in this medium. A lot of people kickstarted this game. Yeah, it was really good in the transition, and then, you know, we were starting to figure it out. You weren't 100% sure what was going on. Because at first I thought it was the dad, because somebody's knocking on the door. And that could have been the dad or child services, and you don't know that it's mom because you're presented with this happy thing. And then you start to pick up on things. You start to pick up on that maybe the monster is more of a feminine thing, and it's just becoming more and more larger and scarier as it goes on. But then we picked up on the bottles, or at least I picked up on the bottles pretty early on. And when I started to think that this is some sort of domestic violence or something to that effect, then the alcohol was a good cue into what was happening on. And then we figured out pretty late in the game that it was probably the mom that was drinking. And was it a result of something the dad did from the beginning, or maybe she's always been a single mom? Who knows? I mean, there's all sorts of things. That the thing is anybody who's experienced anything remotely close to this, they're gonna put their own story in there, and that's what the best films, the best novels, the best music, not always, but oftentimes you can put your personal feelings and your personal experience into those narratives, and your imagination pushes the story towards what you feel is more appropriate. And I'm sure that this game will have triggers for some people who've dealt with abusive and or alcoholic or domestic violence in their house, you know. Nah, I doubt that. I doubt that. I think she's either a single mother and she's overwhelmed, or she's just she's an addict of some sort. Yeah. I don't think there's anything more complicated than that. That in itself is pretty complicated. Looks like this is set up for Oculus. That's probably part of their Kickstarter project. So it says continue story. I'm just gonna see what happens. It probably pops to the last menu again. Yeah, it does. So, and then all this cues back to the beginning. So everything he's experiencing it's all part of his room. Let's get a strike here. So, I mean, that is nice that it all comes back to this. And then you get cues. So early on in the game, the Teddy has him hide in here, and that's he's like, hide in here, I hope no monsters come. So you're hiding in here in the dark, no monsters. You hear weird noises, you're a little frightened, and then the door opens, and it's your mom. And at that point, you don't put two and two together, but he's saying, I hope no monsters come, and the first thing that you see is the mom. So not necessarily. Sometimes people are just addicts. There's not always a backstory to it. There's not always somebody did something. Sometimes people are just addicts. They have addictive personalities. Some people don't like to hear this, but some people just shouldn't have kids. Some people are not cut out to be parents. It's hard. Just being an uncle is, and I only have to deal with the easy parts. If there's a real problem, I can hand off all my nieces to to either of my sisters, because they're kids, they're not mine. So some people get overwhelmed because they're not really fit to be parents, and then you add in. But then there are tons of amazing, and I've known single parents that do an amazing job too. Right now, one of my sisters is, basically, essentially a single parent, and she's doing all right. She needs help from time to time, but so this isn't a one-size-fits-all experience, I don't know why you think that, but that's for you to think. That's your spin on the narrative, and that's completely fine. Like I said, people put their own spins on poems, books, films, music. Take your own personal experience or just what you think of the story and you apply it. That's just how it works. I don't have any problem with any of that. Anyway, so I'm going to take a screenshot of this.